everyone, it is Jaden and our resident expert Caleb here. And as the season has come to an end, it is time for us to look back at the players who we really expected so much out of and they just underachieved all year. And we aren't talking players like Saquon Barkley or Dak Prescott that had season injuries and stuff. We are talking about these players that we just expected so much from, was so excited to get in the drafts or your waiver wires, and they just, week after week, left us in disappointment. So, Caleb, who is number 5 on your 2020 fantasy football dud list?
Yeah, so number 5 is Lamar Jackson. Now, Jackson, he did finish as the number 10 scoring quarterback this year, which means he was technically a starting level of quarterback for your fantasy team. And he did improve as the season went on, but there was just a stretch of time where he was basically unusable, that being weeks 2 through 11, where he was just really bad, and you were probably left just doubting his ability to produce. And you may have even been, looking for waiver wire fill-ins for Jackson. He was just playing so below what you expect from Lamar Jackson. And when you factor that in with the fact that you likely drafted Lamar in the second or third round of your league, you need a lot more production out of him in order to justify that high cost. Now, many Jackson owners are no doubt just very disappointed with Jackson's overall performance this year, and we just hope that he gets better next year and returns back to that 2019 form.
Yeah, Jackson just did not produce the way we all expected, and really could have cost your team a playoff spot if you didn't have a different QB to start instead of him. So, Caleb, now that we have our number 5 spot, who comes in at number 4?
Well, sadly, number 4 is Clyde EdwardsHelaire. Now, CEH did shine at times this year. Think back to week 1 going up against the Texans, and CEH just ran wild. But he just had a lot of hype surrounding him going into this season. And that's because he was a new first round rookie running back going into the Chiefs, who have a very potent offense, and Andy Reid loves his running backs, and Andy Reid running backs usually perform really well. So the expectations were so high for CEH that he was being drafted in the first round. But CEH finished the season outside of the top 20 in running back scoring. And he never really had any of those big boom performances that would win you a week. And the problem with Clyde EdwardsHelaire is just that you were often debating whether he was actually even worth starting in your lineup or not. He was going to score you maybe 10 points in a given week, but he could also score you like 4 or 5 and just wasn't justifiable for you to start him. But he was just good enough to maybe justify starting him. So owners were just perplexed at how to use him. Now, I think he's going to get better, and hopefully he will get better next year.
Okay, although he really did disappoint us in the fantasy football, especially when you had him in his lineups and he didn't score, you do have to admit, though, it was pretty fun watching him sometime whenever he did explode during games. But now that we got our number 4 spot out of the way, who comes in at number 3?
So number 3 is Tyler Lockett. Now, Lockett did finish as a top 10 scoring receiver, and you might look at that and be like, oh, well, that's good. He's fine. He's a wide receiver 1. But most of that production came in 3 huge games, and one of those games didn't even matter for most of us because it was in week 17 when, for many of us, our fantasy football leagues have ended. In fact, if you go back and look at weeks 8 to 16 for Tyler Lockett, he failed to score more than 10 half PPR points all but once. So he had one good, justifiable, startable week from weeks 8 to 16. That's just not what you expect from your wide receiver 1. And that means that for a large portion of the season, that's very important, Lockett was an absolute dud that you felt obligated to start due to his monster performances that he had in weeks 3 and 7.
Lockett definitely did disappoint many people this season, but much like Clyde EdwardsHelaire, it really was fun watching him whenever he did have those explosive performances. So it wasn't a complete loss for all of us. So now who comes in at number 2?
So number 2 is LeVeon Bell. Now, Bell was drafted as a top 20 running back by many people, but he finished the year outside of the top 60 in running back scoring. And that's not because he got injured early in the year, but it's because he just failed to produce. First with the Jets as their lead back, he just could not get anything going. And once the Jets finally released him, and he was picked up by the Chiefs, he didn't fare much better. Now, many people hoped that he would find value as a flex option in a very pass-heavy offense. We know that Bell has succeeded in the past by catching passes out of the backfield. But it turned out that the volume just was not there in Kansas City, and Bell failed to establish a consistent role for himself in that offense. So he was just never worth starting in your lineup all season long.
Yeah, LeVeon just really wasn't able to get it done this year, which is really surprising because of how well he's done in the past. But I guess we'll see what happens next year. Now, for the time that I don't know if you guys have all been waiting for, but this is who we have down as our number one dud of the 2020 fantasy football season.
Yeah, so number one is Todd Gurley. Now, you might be saying, but Todd Gurley wasn't terrible all season, and that's true. He wasn't terrible for the whole season. In fact, for the first 9 weeks of the season, Gurley was startable, and he was exceeding expectations as the Falcons' lead back. He was scoring a ton of touchdowns, which was really just, leveling up his production, as it were. But then, after week 9, he just fell off of a cliff. Now, during the most important weeks of the season, that being the fantasy playoffs, Gurley failed to top 10 points at all. He just never produced as a solid running back ever again. So many people likely made it to the playoffs with Gurley being a cornerstone of their team, being somebody that they could count on as a solid RB2. But then they were probably let down by his poor performances in the playoffs and likely lost that championship. And for that reason, he's our number one dud.
We really feel bad for all you Todd Gurley owners, and just if you own any of these players, we feel bad, especially if you weren't able to overcome these players with other really great players and still make it and win your championship. Guys, it's so important to stay away from these players, and that is why you need to keep in touch with us so we can alert you of our 2021 fantasy football duds. So with that, thank you guys again so much for all your support this season. Thank you for letting us guide you guys to a championship. And with that, we will see you guys next time. Bye.